Granite?
Yes, I am.
First 45 minutes.
I'm John Perrin, I'm one of the biologists.
Okay.
I'm Frances Glazer, another biologist.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim Murphy, AECOM with these guys.
And the rest is our crew here, I believe. So, we'll have more that we'll do by video as we go, but anything else we need to talk about before we get started? Ways to get out of the building, or that way, I think, down the stairs, or
This
that
way,
way,
upstairs.
in case we have an incident. And have good training here and move on.
All right. Well, mine's probably going to be a little bit less than 45 minutes, but that's fine, right?
It's not gonna hurt anybody.
Exactly. So directly following the training, I've got a sign-in sheet with a little statement on there saying that you've received the training, which is one of the stipulations for this training. So we'll make sure to pass that around after we're done. Obviously, this is cultural resources awareness training for the Big Rock Wash Quarry job. My name is Peter Carey. I'm an archaeologist with ASM Affiliates, and the whole purpose of this training is just sort of make you guys aware that there are cultural resources in the area, and there is the potential for them to be encountered during the project while you guys are working. So just a quick overview of what cultural resources are. It's the human element, right? So it runs everything from a beer can from 50 years ago that somebody tossed out all the way back to, you know, a hunter-gatherer campsite from 10, 12,000 years ago, and everything in between. So anything having to relate with humans and our culture, those are cultural resources. And so for historic resources, in general, you have buildings, which obviously courthouses and towns like even Lancaster or any town up Highway 395, Highway 14, you got these old courthouses in there. Those are cultural resources. You also have districts, which could be groupings of buildings like a homestead with the main house, a barn, some outbuildings. That could be one cultural resource as an entire district. You also have historic landscapes where important events happen, such as battlefields over on the east, or what I deal with most, which is historic sites. And that could be foundations for old houses where the house has been destroyed, but the foundation is still there. And most often it's trash pits where they throw all their cans. Basically, before they had waste disposal and waste management, they throw everything in one place, and we go out there and look at the stuff that they tossed out. And you can learn a lot about people from looking at their trash. So we also have archaeological resources. These are prehistoric sites and artifacts that we can learn about the life ways of people living in the past. So you have villages where Native Americans would have been living for, you know, a season and then moving on, but these leave a big signature. I mean, they actually leave a stain on the dirt, really, with all the organic matter, the artifacts, the food products, and everything, and those stay for thousands of years, and you can still see and excavate and find out what they were doing in these sites after that long. You have seasonal campsites, which is sort of the same thing. It's like a village light. You get a little bit less of a signature, but still the same sorts of artifacts from them. Butchering meat, plants, processing all those foods, and just living, really. You have stone tool quarry sites, which there are some tool stone sources in this area, and I'll show you a couple artifacts from this area a little later on the slide. But this is where they're actually going to get the stuff. Like you guys are going to be quarrying here. They would have quarried their tool stone, processed it a little bit there, transported it somewhere else to process it further, and you can see that signature on the landscape. You also have the hunting and butchering sites, and those have a little bit smaller of a signature, and you'll find, you know, arrowheads, dart points, and little sharp flakes that they would have been using basically like a knife to process this meat. We even have traditional trails. I mean, a lot of the roads that we use nowadays were Native American trails. The settlers came in, used the same trails, the pioneers used the same trails, and then we put roads on them. So we're still following a lot of the same paths that were already there. And then one that a lot of people know just from seeing it is rock art. You see pecked rock art or people painting with red pigment on rock. And so those are a lot of the different resources that we deal with, and we deal with all of them. So for this, for this project, we have the Los Angeles Department of Regional Planning, and you guys have a surface mining permit. And in the conditions of approval for that permit, cultural resources are covered under Section 8, subsection J, which says that the permittee shall suspend excavation in the vicinity of a cultural resource encountered during excavation and leave the resource in place until a qualified archaeologist can examine it and determine appropriate mitigation measures. The permittee shall comply with the mitigation measures recommended by the archaeologist and approved by the Director of Planning. So that's really why I'm here also, is to just inform you that things like this may happen and sort of go over how to deal with it if it does happen. So with that, you also have mitigation measures for cultural resources. Mitigation measure H1, which is really the reason why I'm here, says company employees will be trained by a qualified archaeologist to recognize potential archaeological artifacts. So that's what I'm doing right now. Mitigation measure H2 says if any archaeological artifacts are found during the excavation process, the operator will suspend excavation and an archaeologist will be called to evaluate the importance of the artifact. And I'll go over some of the protocols for if this does happen a little bit later. And then finally, mitigation measure 8.3, a management plan will be prepared and kept on file at the plant site that will detail the action that must be taken to protect any potential find. And I've already submitted that management plan. It is on file, so any of your supervisor or anybody can go to it and refer back in the future if they need to figure out what to do if something is encountered. So the most important for this project is laws under California Environmental Quality Act, which does have laws protecting cultural resources. Under CEQA, we have historically significant cultural resources defined by eligibility for or by listing in the California Register of Historical Places. Significant cultural resources have the 4 categories here. A is they're associated with events that may have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of California's history and cultural heritage. This would be somewhere like Sutter's Mill, which is obviously important to California history with the gold rush. And then we have B are associated with the lives of persons important to our past. You can have any kind of places in California that you guys could imagine, maybe the state capitol with important figures in California history coming through there and calling that home for a little bit. You also have C, embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, region, or method of construction, or represent the work of an important creative individual, or possess high artistic values. And this could be a house designed by, Frank Lloyd Wright, or a Victorian house that's really a nice Victorian house. And finally, this is the one that I deal with most often in prehistoric archaeology, is sites that have yielded or may be likely to yield important information in prehistory or history. And this is one that's also important for this project because doing this ground disturbing work, you might not see anything on the surface, but there could be a lot more hidden underneath the surface, especially in a big wash where a lot of activity, you got erosion, deposition all the time, so things get buried. They get lost to time, and then you don't see them until you really dig into the surface and see what's going on. So with CEQA, you also have unique resources, which are similar, but a little bit in contrast to the significant resources. These are resources that contain information needed to answer important scientific research questions, and that there is a demonstrable public interest in that information. 2, has a special and particular quality, such as being the oldest of its type or the best available example of its type. If you go back to the Victorian house, the oldest one in a place or the best one in a place could be a cultural resource. And 3 is directly associated with a scientifically recognized important historic or prehistoric event or person. So all this is to say that these resources are important and they do have laws protecting them, and there's sort of a whole structure behind what we look for and why we record and assign importance to what we find. So with laws come penalties. So with CEQA, you can be fined up to $50,000 for knowingly artifact collecting, excavating in an archaeological site, or otherwise destroying or defacing a historic, cultural, or sacred site. So mostly just be aware that these have penalties and sort of avoid it. So for this project, we are in the Big Rock Wash Quarry, which is coming out of the San Gabriel Mountains into the Antelope Valley, kind of on the border between the Mojave Desert and the Antelope Valley. This place is very important in prehistory. There's a lot of stuff going on here. There are sites not too far away from the Big Rock Wash Quarry that have very important values in California. And so in this area, there are different types of things that are more commonly found. In these areas, I mean, in the rock wash quarry, you're going to be seeing a lot of different types of rocks, but you also may be seeing the same thing over and over again, and it might be something different that catches your eye. And so that's sort of what we're looking for. We can't expect you guys to be experts in cultural resources after a half an hour presentation. So some of the things that we do look for in this area, there are a couple of toolstone sources that are common. One of them is rhyolite up here on the left. It comes in a couple different sizes and packages and colors, but generally it has sort of this closed structure texture with the bigger inclusions in there. It can be like this one, sort of a reddish pink or even a yellowish orange, all the way to sort of a granite gray basically. But they could have used that to make any sort of artifact, so it doesn't have to look like a big chunky thing. It could look like a finished arrowhead or dart point. We also have chert there on the top right. That is a little bit more of a fine structure in the rock, and it's a lot more closed textured, so it'll sometimes appear really glossy and bright, and it generally has a really bright color like a red or a yellow, and it can be marbled, and those are the kind of rocks you see and you're like, that's really cool. So all those can be used to make artifacts like those are actually arrowheads in the middle right there from another site. That's the desert side notch and the cottonwood triangular. Those are some of the youngest projectile points in this area, but they're the most common in this area also. So most people will know when they find an arrowhead because it's a pretty obvious thing. I mean, it looks like an arrowhead that we'd have nowadays, but obviously made of stone. It'll have all these flake scars on it, which are these guys right here, all the little white outlines with the black lines in there. This one right here is about the size of a desert side notch. As you can see, they're pretty tiny. I mean, they're little tiny arrow points. That one's made of obsidian, which is another material that's not really common in this area, but is found. That doesn't occur anywhere in this area, so if you find some obsidian, which is a volcanic glass, it's going to be a glass that's really sharp, shiny, you know that it was brought in by humans. So that's something, if you see a glint coming from wherever you're digging or see some in the back dirt pile, that's when you sort of stop and take note of what you're seeing there. This one right here is one that you might not know until you actually pick it up and take a look at it. This is some Sierra Pelona schist mono. It's about hand size, all rounded corners, and as you can see, this discoloration on the top here, that's from being ground and used to process plant foods. They would have ground it on a metate and just ground out these plant foods. After you do it for a while, you're going to have a really, really bright sheen on there, and it's going to rub all the ridges down and be really, really smooth. This one is actually from a site that's about 5 miles from the big rock wash quarry, so they are in the area, and it's just something to be aware of. Also need to be aware of human remains. Obviously we hope to never find those at any site, but they do happen, and if human remains are found, they are protected by California State Health and Safety Code. If they're Native American remains, they're also protected by California Public Resources Code. If remains are found, I mean, in any instance, you would let your supervisor know, stop work. They'd have to contact the Los Angeles County Coroner, who would also coordinate with the Native American Heritage Commission to identify a most likely descendant. So that's just something to definitely take note of, and just be really cautious if you do identify any. You want to stop work, obviously. So what to do if you guys do see anything. I won't be out there, I won't be monitoring, so it really is on you guys to sort of make sure that you're looking at these things and identifying anything, and doing so will keep you guys in compliance and keep you working. So if you do see anything out there while you're monitoring somebody, or you're actually the operator, you want to stop work, notify your foreman or supervisor, who will let me know. We'll protect the area with flagging and stakes, about a 30-foot buffer, and that's just to give us room to work to go in there and check out what has been found. Our hope is that you have other places that you guys can be working at the time to not stop work for however long it might take, because you never really know until you get into it. And just not go back into those areas, even if we're not there, until after the work is stopped and you guys are, notice that you can recommence work in the area. So to sort of recap, like I said, you are our eyes. I'm not going to be out there. There are resources in the area, and it is possible that they could be uncovered. You might not see them on the surface, but if you're grading, you might pull them up right below. And so just be aware of that. Always have an eye out. If you see something that looks out of the ordinary of what you're looking at, in general. If you're seeing the same type of rock type coming up all the time and then something just catches your eye, just take a second, stop, look at it. That's really all it takes, and that's gonna help keep things going smoothly so that there's no problems in the future and everything keeps going the way it should be. And with that, I have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Is there typical depths you see in the area where you would see a range, like a range of depth?
So it really depends. In somewhere like where you guys will be working, I would expect not too deep just because it's active. Things are going all the time, but it also could be very deep. You get a flood event and then something comes in. But if you have, the desert floor, you're looking at the top few inches really. So somewhere where there's not a lot of deposition, like a flat desert plain with not a lot of washes around, it's not going to be deep at all. A lot of places in the desert and in the Great Basin, they're all surface manifestations. So there's really nothing below the surface. It's all on top. All the wind blows everything away, and then you just have all the artifacts there. But a rock shelter, it can go like 30 feet.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
say the deposits are-
Exactly. How deep the deposits are is how deep the remains could go. Anything else? All right, well, thank you guys a lot. I appreciate it. We have a sign-in sheet right here just to let you guys know, so you can sign that to tell everybody that you took this training and that it was super exciting and that you recommend it to all your friends.
No, thanks for coming.
Good. I'm glad you guys liked it. I enjoyed it too.